We're on page 21. People have been, neighbors have been banging on the walls to keep me up late and wake me up early so that I don't get much sleep. And I think it's intentional. So I'm pushing through anyway, and I'm going to go twice as hard. Page 21. But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. So in the beginning, when I'm a teenager, I may have one drink and just be really trashed. And as time goes by, when I got into my 20s, I could drink like 3 drinks and then be just trash drunk. But somewhere along the line, I don't know exactly what age, when, or how, or what, or when, I couldn't stop. Once I started drinking, I couldn't stop until I passed out. Something happened in my body where my body changed and it didn't break down liquor like it used to. Here's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He's seldom mildly intoxicated. He's always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly, even dangerously antisocial. You stop for a minute. He does absurd, illogical, inappropriate, wildly unreasonable, insane, foolish, wild, uncontrolled, absurd, incredible, unbelievable, tragic things while drinking. Changes into a completely different person. Never just a little bit tipsy, always completely trashed. Insanely drunk. His character, which is his disposition, the way that he normally acts while drinking, doesn't look anything like the person that he is when he's sober. And then when he's sober, he's one of the best people in the world, but when he drinks for a single day, he gets dangerous, disgusting, antisocial. This is the description of a real alcoholic. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He has a natural ability to just get drunk at the very wrong time, especially when there's something important, like there's an important meeting, you know. If there's somewhere where he really wants to show up in his best self and make a good presentation, that's the moment when it's just too much pressure. And probably thinks, I'll just have a couple to loosen up. knowing somewhere in the back of his mind that there's no such thing as a couple, and then gets completely trashed. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes. So most alcoholics are going to have natural abilities in areas that are not the same as normal people. I can't give you, for instance, I don't know. Has a promising career ahead of him, and he uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. So, after he gets everything he wants, maybe he succeeds. He gets the home, he gets the job, he gets the car, he gets the wife, he gets the kids, he gets everything. And then it's almost like suddenly there's nothing left to get. And then goes and celebrates and stops trying and destroys it all. He's the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. I don't know, I think I hid alcohol from myself. When you wake up, if you're a normal drinker and you have a couple drinks and you wake up the next morning with a hangover and you feel yucky and hungover, you might do what normal people do, drink water and take a couple aspirins, have a meal and go on about your life. An alcoholic, when they wake up hungover and sick, the solution is always going to be the same. It's going to be more alcohol. And it's a joke to say hair of the dog, but it's not really funny because if you're an alcoholic and you try doing the hair of the dog to feel better, the next thing you know is you're drunk again for another whole entire day and you wake up sick again the next day and that goes on and it's hair of the dog the next day, It's never ending. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedatives and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. So now it's alcohol and pills together to stay calm. We're afraid what will happen if we're not calm. Other people are afraid of what will happen if we're not calm. But all you got to do is get through that part. It'll be all right. You're going to be okay. I was so scared to not be calm. I had someone say to me, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to be sober, and I understand that. But your feelings won't kill you. And the alcohol and drugs might, but getting sober won't. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Okay, so he's taking pills to go to sleep so he can get up in the morning and go to work. And then comes a day when he can't make it and gets drunk all over again. And perhaps he goes to a doctor, gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. I took I took trazodone for like a month and a half when I sobered up. My doctor gave me trazodone because I couldn't sleep. And terrible nightmares and scary thoughts just constantly. It was really hard. This is by no means okay. Yeah, so then the doctor gives his morphine and sedatives. Then he starts to appear at hospitals and sanitariums, because when the doctor gives you, if you're a practicing alcoholic and the doctor gives you something to calm you down, a sleeping pill, and you combine the sleeping pills with alcohol, that makes the mental problems worse. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Everyone's different. The true alcoholic, the real alcoholic. One. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle, which is a disaster, with all its attendant suffering, the consequences is the attendant suffering. So he drinks, it's disaster, the consequences are horrific, and humiliation, how embarrassing. Why does he take that one drink when he already knows from hundreds and thousands of times that one drink is going to cause this? Why? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Okay, water wagon comes from a horse-drawn water cars that sprinkled the dirt roads to keep the dust down. That's where that water wagon comes from. What's become of his good judgment, willpower that he sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Everyone wants to know why. You think if you get down to the whys and the causes and the conditions that you can stop the problem. If you get stuck on the whys too long, then you forget to implement the solution, which is always the same. If the problem's always the same and the solution's always the same, it doesn't really matter what the problem is. You just move towards a solution and start taking the action that you know is to be the right answer. Instead of trying to figure it out in your head, why, just do the next right thing and do it, regardless of how you feel and what you think. You can get stuck on that. But if you want to know why, there's probably a lot of different reasons why. There's spiritual, mental, emotional. It's like we're born, some of us this way, some of us are created this way, some of us become this way, some of us were conditioned to be this way. There's PTSD and childhood trauma, and there's a million different whys as to why people become an alcoholic, but the solution seems to be the same. so that we can all follow the same path toward the same solution that works. Okay? So let's focus on the solution. Um, Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions, written back in 39. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. Everybody's got an opinion. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer this riddle. It's a puzzle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We're equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, once he takes any alcohol, whatever, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. So we don't we don't I done that test. I thought, well, maybe I can just maybe let me see if they're let me see if this is true or not. So I did it. I took a sip of champagne. And it wasn't my idea. It was a normal drinker said, you can't even have one sip. And I thought, I don't know. I didn't really try. So I did. I took a sip, and that worked so well that the next day I said, let me try two sips. And so the next day I took two sips. I said, well, that didn't do anything. Let me go ahead and drink half a glass. And that's all I remember for 9 months. I was like, for 9 months, I blacked out drunk. And it all started from one sip and the mental obsession that says maybe it'll be different this time. Oh, Lord. So the mental obsession coupled with the physical allergy. The mental obsession says maybe it'll be different. The physical allergy is the craving. Okay. Not even one drop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. It wouldn't matter if we never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. So it wouldn't be a problem if we never picked up the first drink. So you can't say, that you got the allergy to alcohol and that you have the physical craving first. What first comes first is the mental obsession saying maybe it'll be different this time, or maybe I just don't care anymore, or, maybe whatever the excuses are, it all starts in our minds. It starts there. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. An alibi is a legal defense used by a defendant to claim that they were somewhere else. Ah, an excuse, you know. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, probability, but none of them really make sense in the light of the general havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. It doesn't really make sense when you see the destruction of the that happens during the spree. There's nothing that makes sense about it. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache. It doesn't make any sense. So when, it doesn't matter what the reason is. If you say, well, I had a toothache, so, I needed to drink, or I had some pain, I wanted to drink, or I felt sad, or I had to go to a funeral, so I had to drink, or so I went through a divorce, so I had to drink, or someone didn't love me, so I had to drink, or ah, because the consequences that you already know are going to happen, if you think about it, from taking one drink are so enormous, are so huge, you know, if you think about it, that it's not worth it. It's really not. And we never know when that last one's going to be. And if you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, if you draw it, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. If you try to help them understand what stinking drinking thinking is, they're going to get mad because they don't want to know the truth right now. you know, they want a practicing alcoholic wants to hold on to their excuses so they could justify the destruction they cause in everyone else's life. And I understand that as a human being, I have the right to destroy my life if I choose to. But then when you realize that everyone around you is getting affected by your choices, now the choice is become harmful to other human beings in society at large, then it's different. Now you're not just harming yourself anymore. I think that's what's going on a lot now. No one really cares anymore, but I don't know what that solution is. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they're satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. Once this disease is dug in, they're confused. There's the obsession that somehow, someday, they'll beat the game, but they often suspect they're down for the count. Yeah. So once again, it doesn't matter if we know what the reason is, it doesn't matter. Because the solution is always going to be the same. That's the name of this chapter. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. So, so, man, family and friends don't really know what to do. They just hope that maybe someday this person will wake up and realize, wake up from a sleep and make the decision to fight the disease. And it says assert his power of will. Assert means behave or speaking in a confident, forceful manner. So you hope that someday I just want to say fight. The power of will is the ability to delay gratification. resisting short-term temptations in order to meet long-term goals. The tragic truth is that if a man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. So he lost control. He lost the power to control is the power to influence or direct people's behavior in the course of events. This is where they say surrender to win, stop trying to fix it, don't try to stop drinking. We don't try to stop drinking instead of trying to stop drinking, because that only makes us drink more. If you say don't drink, don't drink, don't drink, all you're going to think of is alcohol, right? It's like, don't think of a pink elephant, you're going to think of a pink elephant. So instead of not drinking, we focus on doing recovery. So this is why Alcoholics and Addicts are big on recovery. So instead of focusing and obsessing on the problem, we start focusing and obsessing on the solution. So whatever I focus on is going to get bigger. If I focus on the alcohol will get bigger. If I focus on the solution will get bigger. If I focus on my program will get bigger. If I focus on God will get bigger. If I focus on helping others will get bigger. Whatever, and so we want to obsess on something that's going to be beneficial to us instead of trying to stop ourselves. And so, that's why treatment works real good. Okay, he passes into a condition where the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. For unclear reasons, we don't know why, our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. Our self-restraint doesn't exist. We are unable at certain times to bring into our conscious awareness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago, or without defense against the first drink. Okay, so we can't remember. It's like our brains stops us from remembering it. I think our brains have a defense mechanism that blocks out, traumatic or bad memories, and then that part of the brain got real big, where I just blocked out everything. But we can make a conscious effort to remember, like they say, follow the tape all the way through. I make a conscious effort to remember every day. Trying to drink trauma memories away only makes it worse. That's my note. Or without protection. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us, to stop us. If these thoughts occur, they're hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. The results, the results, what's going to happen doesn't come into our minds, so it can't stop us because we can't think of it. And if we do have a thought like that, it's not strong enough and it's not clear enough to do the job to stop us. And then it's like suddenly a different thought takes the place of that thought, okay, right away. So it just doesn't stay there long enough. And we think it'll be different this time again, you know. There's a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. So something in the brain. Old stinking drinking thinking. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, "It won't burn me this time, so here's how," you know? And they're going to prove to themselves this time they can only drink one, or this time they can only drink two. They're going to prove they're strong enough to do it. And the problem with that is it's an ego feeding proposition. It's not going to work. The only the only thing that works is to admit we can't do it. Surrender to the fact and accept it. Once you surrender and accept you can't pick up the first drink, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to not pick up that one drink, whatever it takes on a daily basis, then you got to start. Because once again, it's not all about you anymore. You know, it's not all about me anymore. It's about making up for the time that I was, the years that I was on a self-destructive path that I didn't realize affected people around me. So now making up for that time, I have to, you know, do the right thing now. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, "It won't burn me this time, so here's how." You know what? We can do that with, a lot of things, not just only alcohol. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us began to drink in this nonchalant way? We didn't care and we weren't concerned. And after the third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, "For God's sake, how did I ever get started again?" Only to have that thought supplanted or replaced with, "Oh, well, I'll stop with the sixth, or what's the use anyhow?" So, we lost the ability to care. That's insanity. When this sort of thinking is full, that's why self-pity is so bad for alcoholics, because it's not just about us anymore. When I'm feeling sorry for myself, it's affected everyone else around me, and I don't want to harm people by my mere existence anymore. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he's probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. When that neural pathway is engraved over and over again in someone who has alcoholism, which is allergy, you're allergic, an allergy to alcohol, then beyond human aid means meant to cause hopelessness, but there is always hope in reality. I don't know where I got that from, but there is always hope. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot. There is a solution. This is the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's not just Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a lot of religions that that encompass these principles in their religion that's helped many more people besides only people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's why it works so well. So, if you're hopeless and you don't know what to do, there's a way out if you're willing to do what it takes. Almost none of us liked the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. No one wants to look at where am I wrong, and leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings as part of the 12 steps. But we saw for its successful completion, we saw that it really worked in others. And we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. It's like the condensed steps. Ego puncturing fourth dimension represents, okay, look. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved. So when someone has solved their alcoholism and they come to you, then you see that they have. There was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. So nobody's gonna force anyone to try to practice the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I cannot hand it to you on a silver platter. It is a daily discipline that comes from a willingness that I have based on the amount of pain that I had to suffer through that I'm not willing to go through again. And the desire to help another human being. That's where it comes from. So I'm powerless over my alcoholism, but I'm not powerless over my recovery. Every day I have a choice. We all wake up the same place. Okay, we wake up right there in the middle. And if you don't do anything, you slide back into your disease. Okay, but if you choose to do recovery, every little decision that you make towards your recovery puts you at the opposite end of the spectrum. There's recovery and there's your disease. You wake up in the middle. Are you going to call your sponsor? Are you going to read literature? Are you going to pray? Are you going to go to a meeting? Are you going to help another alcoholic? Whatever you do towards your recovery, journaling, therapy, whatever you do is going to keep you sober that day. So tomorrow we'll wake up the same way. Every day it's a daily decision. If you choose not to decide, you made a choice. If you choose to do nothing because you don't want to do anything, then you can stay sick, alcoholic. Or you can choose to work your recovery every day. And that's the choice we all have. And use your willpower in that way. That's the proper use of the will. We found much of heaven and we've been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. A fourth dimension is a higher spiritual consciousness. It is the unseen world. Okay, it's a spiritual world. And I could say, in the Bible, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, which means it's within reach. And a lot of people say that meant him, but I think that you can find heaven on earth. Some of us believe that. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. So the purpose of the 12 steps is to give us the spiritual experience or awakening. I say awakening from the 12 steps that comes from several spiritual experiences that create a spiritual awakening, which changed our the way we look at things, changes our perception. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. So now we know, and the central fact of our lives is the main idea of my recovery is that God lives in me and around me miraculously, and that He is doing for me what I could never do for myself. He's commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. But we can do it with God, but we need to find a God. So when it says, if you want what we have, in the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, if you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. This is what we have. What we have is deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. That's what we have, okay? We have absolute certainty that our Creator has entered our hearts and lives in a way which is miraculous, and that He's accomplished those things for us which we couldn't do by ourselves. If you are seriously alcoholic, as we were, we believe there's no middle of the road solution. If you're gravely, seriously, and not playing games here, really a bad alcoholic, uh, we don't think there's any halfway. It's like 100% or nothing, because it's just got to be 100%. Can't like half-ass. You're trying to save your life. It's not the time to half-ass it. We're in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we passed into the region from which there's no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. So if I already begged God a million times to help me stop drinking, like I actually did that once. I was in my 20s. God, please help me stop drinking. And so I got up off the couch and I walked into the kitchen, and He let me do that. And I opened the refrigerator door and He let me do that. And I reached my hand out and grabbed a can of beer and He let me do that. And then I popped it open and drank it, and God didn't stop me. Yeah. I was begging God to help me, and I wasn't willing to do anything. I wanted Him to do it for me without me having to do anything. So we have two choices when you're at that spot, and one is to just go ahead and hide, hide from yourself as best you can, which really sucks. And the other is to accept spiritual help, which is hard because we have spiritual pride. We don't want anyone to tell us anything about God or principles or life or the Bible or anything, man. Don't tell me anything. Who do you think you are? So we're not going to learn anything if we're the only ones teaching us. Spiritual awakening is the fourth dimension, is in the opening of spiritual eyes to see the unseen. You know, there's something really cool about when you get sober and you can see in the spirit with your spiritual eyes. Life is a lot different. But accepting help is the first step. That's the hardest one. If we do it every day, it gets easier. This we did because we honestly wanted to when we're willing to make the effort. Now you can't pretend, but you can fake it for a little while until you actually like, I didn't really want. I didn't think I wanted to be sober, but I wanted to be sober. I wanted to quit drinking, okay, but I didn't really want to be sober. Why? You know? So your willingness is your self-will. You can use that as your foundation. Now it's going to go into another story. I'm really tired. We're past 30 minutes, so we're going to start on page 26.